Welcome to Fiction Flux. Today, we're diving into a brand new fanfic, What If Naruto Was Raised by the Akatsuki? So grab your snacks, wear your headphones, and get ready. Because this story is about to twist the Naruto world in a way you've never seen before. Let's begin this awesome fanfic. Rain poured endlessly over the ruins of a forgotten village, the sky mourning a child no one wanted. Naruto Uzumaki sat alone, soaked to the bone, his tiny hands gripping a crumpled piece of bread someone had thrown at him, not out of kindness but disgust. The villagers whispered behind his back, "Demon, monster, why is he still alive?" He didn't know why, he didn't understand what he did wrong. All he wanted was someone to smile at him, to say his name like it meant something. On his 5th birthday, instead of cake and candles, he got chased out of the village by drunks. He hid in a sewer tunnel for days, feverish and hungry. No one came looking, but someone had been watching. From the shadows of the trees, Pain and Conan observed the boy through the rain. "He's still alive. That's impressive," Conan whispered. Pain narrowed his eyes. No child should suffer like this. Especially not the Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails. Conan placed a flower beside Naruto's tiny sleeping form before they vanished. A week later, as Naruto collapsed in the forest from starvation, a man in a swirling orange mask appeared. "You're not wanted here, are you, Naruto?" Tobi said with a cheerful tone that didn't match the coldness in his single eye. Naruto flinched. Who are you?" "Someone who knows what it's like to be alone. Come with me, let's show them what they threw away." Naruto, trembling and broken, took the masked man's hand. Years passed. The next time anyone saw Naruto, he wasn't the loud-mouthed, clumsy boy anymore. He wore a cloak, black with red clouds, and his eyes held a storm far darker than the one he was born into. Under the guidance of the Akatsuki, Naruto grew powerful. Pain taught him about pain, true pain, the kind that carves scars into your soul. Conan showed him beauty in destruction. Itachi trained him in silence and awareness, and even Kisame taught him to wield chakra like a blade. But it was Deidara and Sasori who sparked his creativity. Naruto found himself drawn to their twisted artistry, expressing his rage through explosions and puppets alike. Yet, despite the strength, a part of him was still that lonely boy. He laughed with Tobi, trained with Hidan, and debated philosophy with Kakuzu. They weren't heroes, but they were a family. One night, Conan found Naruto staring into the fire. "Do you hate them?" she asked. "The villagers." He looked up, his expression unreadable. "I don't know," he whispered. "I wanted to be their Hokage once. I wanted them to see me. But now I see them. They don't deserve saving." She said nothing, just sat beside him, shoulder to shoulder. But deep down, Naruto still wondered, if one person, just one, had reached out to him back then, would things have been different? He never got an answer. All he knew now was this. The world made a monster. And the monster had come home. Konoha didn't know it yet, but the winds of fate were shifting. News traveled fast. Small border villages disappearing overnight, shinobi patrols found in pieces, a crimson cloud painted on the walls in blood. The Akatsuki were moving with purpose, and at their center, a blonde storm with eyes like molten gold. Naruto stood atop a cliff, looking down at the hidden leaf. His childhood home, his personal hell. "It's time," Pain said, stepping beside him. "Are you ready?" Naruto didn't answer. His eyes were locked on the Hokage monument, the faces of the ones who had protected the very people who abandoned him. He wondered if his father's face would cry if it could. "It doesn't feel like home," he muttered. "It never was," Itachi said, walking up behind them. "Home isn't a place, it's the people who stand with you." Naruto nodded. He had learned that the hard way. The Akatsuki didn't rush, they moved with precision, each member infiltrating different parts of the village like ghosts. Naruto's mission was simple: retrieve the Nine Tails' full control. He no longer feared the fox. Kurama had been his only companion in the darkness, and over the years, a strange bond had formed. As he entered the village undetected through a hidden sewer entrance, the same one he once cried in as a child, memories surged like poison. He passed the alley where he was first beaten. The shop that denied him water. The swing at the academy, always swinging alone. His fists clenched, but his heart didn't race. He was calm, too calm. He reached the shrine where the seal could be unlocked. Inside, Jiraiya stood waiting. "Naruto." For a moment, the world paused. Jiraiya's eyes widened at the cloak, at the cold, almost unrecognizable aura surrounding his godson. "You're with them?" he asked, voice broken. Naruto tilted his head. "You knew I was suffering. You were there. Why didn't you take me?" I didn't think." "No," Naruto cut him off. "You didn't care." Kurama stirred inside him, sensing the tension. "I'm here for full access to Kurama's power," Naruto said. "Stand aside." Jiraiya's expression hardened. "I can't let you do that." Behind Naruto, Itachi appeared. "He won't step aside," he said quietly. Naruto looked at Jiraiya one last time. "Then I guess I really don't have anyone left here." Their clash shattered the shrine. Lightning cracked, fire tore the skies, and two generations of power collided. In the end, Jiraiya stood on one knee, battered and bleeding. "You're stronger than I imagined," he wheezed. Naruto's hand sparked with chakra, ready for the final blow, but he paused. "I don't hate you," Naruto said quietly. "But I can't forgive you either." He turned away. Outside, chaos bloomed. The Akatsuki overwhelmed the village defenses. But Naruto didn't seek to destroy Konoha. He wanted them to see what they had lost. When the fighting stopped, the Akatsuki vanished like smoke. And in the middle of the ruins, a single message burned into the ground. "You turned your back on me. Now I've turned my back on you." The world would remember that day. The day the village's biggest failure became its greatest warning. And the boy no one loved became a legend that even the gods feared. The flames of Konoha smoldered long after the Akatsuki vanished, but the true fire had only just been lit, in Naruto's heart, and in the world that had dared to forget him. Every major village was now on high alert. The Akatsuki weren't hunting tailed beasts anymore. They were something else now. Something worse. A rebellion. A message. In the shadows of destroyed outposts and fractured alliances, whispers began to spread. The demon child of the leaf had returned, and he wasn't a child anymore. The Raikage slammed his fist on the table, cracking it in two. "You're telling me Konoha let the Akatsuki walk in, beat their Sannin, and leave a message like that?" "Why yes, Lord Raikage," the shinobi stammered. "They say it was Naruto Uzumaki leading them." The Raikage scowled. "That brat, the Jinchuriki. No, not just a Jinchuriki anymore. He's different. Even the Nine Tails fears him now." Naruto sat cross-legged beneath a steel tower as rain pattered down around him. His hands were still blood-stained, but his eyes were distant. He could feel the world watching. "War is coming," Konan said softly beside him. "You know that." "I don't want war," Naruto replied. "But if the world only understands pain, then I'll speak their language." Pain walked in, his voice echoing with authority. "Our goal remains. Peace through strength. Through understanding pain." Naruto's gaze hardened. "No, not just peace. Justice." Far from it all, in a cave lit by flickering torches, Sasuke Uchiha trained, rage burning in every movement. He had heard the rumors too. That Naruto had joined the Akatsuki. That he had turned his back on Konoha. That he had fought Jiraiya and won. For a long time, Sasuke had imagined what facing Naruto again would be like. But now it would be different. They were no longer just two boys chasing dreams. They were storms, one born of vengeance, the other of betrayal. She remembered the boy on the swing. The boy who smiled, even when no one smiled back. Now the image was replaced by a different one, the cloaked figure, standing tall over the ruins of Konoha. Was that really Naruto? Her heart hurt, not from fear, from guilt. She could have been the one. She should have said something, held his hand, shown him kindness. But now the world would suffer because it didn't. They didn't just destroy, they liberated. Missed villages where shinobi children were tortured, freed. Border towns crushed by daimyo taxes, rescued. Uchiha survivors in hiding, given sanctuary. Naruto became more than a threat. He became a symbol. To some, the devil. To others, the savior. And when he stood before the five-cage summit, cloaked in shadows, they all fell silent. "You hunted me, hated me, forgot me," he said. "But now, you remember, don't you? You stand with terrorists." The Tsuchikage shouted. "No," Naruto said calmly. "I stand with the broken. The abandoned. The ones you stepped on to build your thrones." The alliance couldn't ignore him any longer. Sasuke, now allied with Konoha again, not because he forgave them, but because he refused to let Naruto go unchecked, stepped forward. "I'll stop him," he said. "He's my brother, and my rival." It took place in the ruins of the Valley of the End. This time, there were no words. Just raw, divine power. Rasengans collided with lightning-charged Chidori. Kurama roared while Susanoo screeched. The sky tore apart, and in the end, both lay broken, side by side, like they had as kids. Sasuke coughed blood. You really became a monster. Naruto smiled sadly, only because the world needed one. A new world emerged. The villages no longer stood alone. Borders faded. The shinobi system was rewritten, not by the Hokage, but by a boy who was never chosen, never praised, never loved. Naruto never became Hokage. He became something else entirely. A ghost, a legend, a force. Children read about the demon sage in books. Some feared him, some idolized him, and far away, in the land once known as Amegakure, a man with sunlit hair sat under a cherry blossom tree, watching the rain. Not smiling, not crying, just remembering. 15 years later, the shinobi world had changed. No more secret missions to destabilize nations. No more hidden child soldiers bred to die for a village's pride. Under the Akatsuki's influence, now reborn as the Crimson Circle, the 5 great nations became provinces of a unified system, the Shinobi Accord. The daimyo had no power. Ninja were no longer disposable. Peace reigned, but peace always comes at a price. Land of Rain now called Haven. A girl about 12, with short spiky black hair and golden eyes, darted through the training grounds, dodging kunai with speed that defied her age. Again, she shouted, and the wooden clone in front of her attacked with a chakra arm. She blocked it with a Rasengan infused with crimson energy, an unstable mix of chakra. And something else, something deeper. From afar, an older man watched in silence. Cloaked, calm, a little tired, Naruto Uzumaki. His hair was longer now, tied back in a rough ponytail. His face was marked with lines not just from age, but from carrying the world's hatred and change on his back. She's getting stronger, Konan said, appearing beside him. Too strong. Naruto nodded slowly. She's my daughter. What did you expect? Have you told her? No, she was a prodigy, feared and respected across Haven, though still a child. She had no surname, no mother she knew, only her father, Naruto, the demon sage. But something always nagged her. Why did people look at her with awe and sorrow? Why did they flinch when she smiled? She confronted Naruto that night, storming into the old steel tower. You trained me, you raised me, you taught me everything except the one thing I need to know. Naruto turned slowly, eyes still the same molten gold. Who was my mother? Silence. And then, she was someone who believed in me when no one else did. She saved me, and I couldn't save her. Arashi's eyes widened. She was from Konoha. Naruto looked out the window. No, she was Konoha. Ghosts of the past. The world might have forgotten heroes like Hinata, Sakura, even Kakashi, people who fought in the shadows, lost in the rewriting of history. But Naruto hadn't. They were the reasons he didn't destroy everything. He preserved their memory, even as he buried the system they fought for. But Arashi wasn't satisfied. She needed answers, truths, legacy. So she did what Naruto once did. She ran away, journeyed to the ruins of Konoha. The village was overgrown now, nature reclaiming what hatred abandoned. She explored the broken remains of the academy, the swing set where her father once sat. And there, she met an old man, blind in one eye, walking with a cane. Sasuke Uchiha, so you're the demon's daughter, he said, voice dry but not unkind. And you're the one who tried to stop him. Arashi sat. For hours, they talked. He told her of the real Naruto. Not the legend, not the warrior, but the boy, the lonely, ramen-loving, idiot who just wanted someone to believe in him. Arashi returned to Haven different. Father and daughter. I met him, she said. Naruto looked up from his scrolls. Sasuke, she nodded. He told me who you used to be. Who you could have been. Naruto said nothing. Then she walked forward and placed something on the table. A folded, worn-out forehead protector. Konoha's symbol scratched across it. You still want peace, don't you? Naruto stared at the symbol for a long time. And then, he smiled. Truly smiled. For the first time in a long time, yeah. The future begins again. Together, father and daughter founded a new academy. One where orphans were never ignored, where every student learned not just jutsu, but empathy, history, choice. No more villages, no more weapons, just shinobi, protectors, not pawns. And in time, Arashi would be known not as the daughter of the demon, but as the first light of the new world. The world had begun to settle, but peace always leaves behind echoes. Arashi stood on the tower's edge in Haven, staring at the horizon where the sky kissed the ruined lands beyond. Her father had rebuilt a world of structure and equality, but whispers of resistance, of those nostalgic for the old power-hungry ways, began to rise from the shadows. She trained harder. Her Rasengan was more precise, her chakra control far superior to what Naruto had at her age. Yet she felt the weight of legacy, the burden of carrying her father's dream forward. One evening, as rain poured across the silent city, a masked figure slipped through Haven's defenses. The guards never saw him. He left only a mark, 3 vertical lines carved into the wall, with the phrase, "Return the flame." Naruto examined it closely. This mark, it's from the Hidden Flame cult. They were exiled years ago. They're back, Conan asked. They never left. They were waiting. That night, Naruto called Arashi into his chamber. You need to be ready, he said. This piece, it has enemies. Then let me fight them. You will, but not yet. First, I have to return to the ruins of the Flame Temple. There are truths I left buried there. She reached out and grabbed his sleeve. I'm coming too. He looked at her. For the first time, he saw not just his daughter, but a shinobi who had earned her place beside him. They traveled under moonlight, avoiding major roads. In the silence of night, Arashi asked, was the world ever truly at peace? Naruto sighed. For a while. But peace isn't something you win once. You fight for it every day. The Flame Temple was buried beneath earth and ash. What had once been a sacred place was now consumed by rot and dark chakra. They moved cautiously. Inside the central hall, they found the truth. A scroll, sealed with ancient chakra, pulsed with a red glow. Naruto's eyes narrowed. This is Jashin's symbol. Before they could react, a dozen figures stepped from the shadows, cloaked, masked, chakra twisted with forbidden techniques. A man stepped forward, his face scarred, voice soaked in venom. Naruto Uzumaki, you built a world without gods. We are here to remind you, gods don't die. They wait. Naruto stood in front of Arashi. You're not gods, just men afraid of change. The cultist smiled. Then let's see if change can bleed. The fight exploded in fire and fury. Arashi launched herself forward, her crimson Rasengan clashing with blades of cursed energy. Naruto moved like a shadow, his movements fluid, precise, deadly. Together, they fought as one, father and daughter, flame and wind. But the cult leader was powerful. His body stitched with dark rituals, chakra unholy and endless. He struck Naruto across the chest, sending him crashing through the temple wall. Arashi screamed, her rage unlocking something inside her. Her eyes burned golden red, and her chakra erupted in a spiral of pure force. She didn't hold back. Her Rasengan tore through the leader's defenses, slamming into his chest and ripping through his cursed heart. He gasped, stunned, as he crumbled to the ground. Naruto pulled himself up, bloodied but proud. You've surpassed me, he whispered. Arashi turned to him, eyes fierce. Not yet, but I will. I swear it. They returned to Haven as heroes, but the warning was clear, the cult was just the beginning. The world still remembered gods. And Arashi would be the one to remind them, this world belongs to the living, not the forgotten. She would rise. She would fight. She would finish what Naruto started. Years passed, and Arashi grew stronger, not just in power but in resolve. Haven became a beacon of hope in a world still crawling with remnants of the old era, corrupt mercenary clans, rogue shinobi, and underground cults clinging to power like parasites. But none dared strike openly, not while the demon sage still lived. Then one night, the sky above Haven burned red. Explosions tore through the outer sectors. Alarm bells screamed. Shadowy figures, marked with ancient symbols, poured into the city. Arashi rushed out, chakra blazing, leading her team of elite shinobi. They were faster, sharper, and more disciplined than any force the villages of old had ever known. But the enemy was prepared. From the smoke emerged a figure cloaked in flame-like chakra, face hidden behind a porcelain mask. You, Arashi hissed. I am Kairo, hand of the forgotten flame. The figure said, and I have come to finish what your father feared. They clashed, chakra splitting the skies. Arashi moved like lightning, her Rasengan tearing through walls, but Kairo's strange jutsu absorbed her attacks. He twisted space itself, warping her movements, always staying one step ahead. Naruto arrived, cloak fluttering, eyes glowing with Kurama's dying embers. He stepped beside his daughter. You really want this fight? He asked Kairo. I want the world you stole. I want the chaos you buried. Naruto smirked. Then come get it. Father and daughter fought together once more, weaving through a storm of fire and shadows. Kairo was fast, his power fueled by stolen souls, his blade coated in the essence of ancient gods. But Naruto and Arashi were faster. Naruto drew him in with shadow clones and decoys, while Arashi struck from above, her chakra bursting into a new form, crimson wings of energy, her own evolution of the Sage Mode. She struck with a Rasengan that spun like a star, crashing into Kairo's chest, shattering his mask. He fell, coughing blood. You think peace will last forever? Arashi stood tall. No, that's why I'll fight for it every day. Kairo laughed once before vanishing into dust. In the aftermath, Naruto collapsed. He was dying. Years of battle, sacrifice, and the fading link to Kurama had finally taken their toll. Arashi knelt beside him. Don't go. I have to. My time is done. I'm not ready. Yes, you are. I see it in you. You'll do more than I ever could. You're the future I dreamed of. He touched her forehead one last time. Live free, Arashi. And then, the demon sage was gone. The world mourned. But Arashi didn't cry. She rose, cloaked in light and memory. And the world knew, from that day on, peace had a new guardian. Not born of prophecy, not chosen by fate, but shaped by pain, and forged by love. Years flowed like quiet rivers across the land. Under Arashi's leadership, Haven transformed. Not just a city, it became the heart of the world. A place where shinobi from every corner gathered not to wage war, but to learn. Borders faded, hatred became history. Children born in Haven didn't know what it meant to be from Konoha, Suna, or Kiri. They only knew peace. But peace, as always, was fragile. Deep beneath the land of Earth, sealed away since the end of the Fourth Great War, something began to stir. Whispers spread, of a power older than chakra, older than shinobi, an ancient entity once glimpsed only by the Sage of Six Paths. The Voidborn. Arashi first heard the name from the mouth of a trembling refugee who stumbled into Haven, his mind broken, body glowing with tainted chakra. He screamed of shadows swallowing stars, of an army without form, feeding on chakra and will. That night, Arashi sat in her father's old chamber. She opened the scrolls Naruto had kept hidden, ones even she hadn't touched. Pages filled with mad symbols, drawings of constellations twisted into spiral shapes. And one line, written by Naruto himself. If peace ever trembles, look to the stars. The real enemy doesn't. A council was called, the elders of Haven, the wisest from every clan and corner of the new world. Former enemies now allies, sitting beneath one banner. Arashi stood at the center, her crimson cloak billowing behind her, the weight of leadership heavier than ever. They're not men, they're not shinobi, she said. They are something far worse. They feed on chakra, emotion, memory itself. Many doubted her, a few even laughed, until the skies darkened. A black rift tore open above the northern mountains. From it descended creatures that defied logic, eyeless, formless masses that moved like smoke but struck like steel. Villages vanished, lands went silent. Arashi led the charge. She and her elite unit, the Crimson Guard, battled the creatures on frozen plains, using chakra infused with emotion to repel the devourers. But each battle drained her. The Voidborn were learning, adapting. Every victory came with loss. She knew brute strength wouldn't win this. So she turned to legacy. She returned to the Valley of the End, where once Naruto and Sasuke clashed. There, she meditated for 7 days, reaching deep into the spiritual plane. And on the 8th day, she saw them. Spirits, echoes, her father, Jiraiya, Kakashi, even Kurama, now a shimmering fox of pure chakra. They showed her the truth. The Voidborn were remnants of a broken world. Before chakra, before humanity, they ruled in silence. The rise of chakra had driven them underground, but never destroyed them. To stop them now, Arashi would have to become something more. She returned from the valley changed, her body radiated with a new light, her chakra fused with spiritual essence. Not sage mode, not tailed beast power, something older, the will of earth and sky. She stood alone atop Mount Uzu when the Voidborn descended in full. Millions of shadows raining down. And she raised her hand. A spiral of energy erupted, not just from her, but from every shinobi she trained. Every child who believed, every soul who carried peace in their heart. Across the world, shinobi raised their hands too. The Voidborn burned in a sea of chakra-powered unity. A war without blades, a battle won not by destruction, but by connection. The skies cleared, the rift closed, And Arashi fell to her knees, her body flickering like flame. The people ran to her, but she smiled. "I'm not dying," she whispered. "I'm becoming." Her body dissolved into glowing embers, lifting into the sky. From that day on, whenever the wind stirred through Haven, people would say they could hear her laugh. When children trained, they'd say the light in their chakra felt warmer. Arashi Uzumaki was gone, but her dream lived forever. Years turned into decades. Without Arashi, Haven didn't collapse, it blossomed. The Crimson Guard became mentors, leaders, storytellers. New generations of shinobi were raised on tales not of war, but of unity. Schools replaced academies, clans intermingled freely, and chakra was studied like an art, not a weapon. But beneath the peace, the world never forgot. Monuments were built, one for Naruto, the boy who bore hatred and turned it into hope. Another for Arashi, the girl who rose from shadow and stood against the sky itself. And far away, hidden deep in the cliffs of the southern sea, a lone wanderer stood at the edge of a shrine. His eyes, golden and quiet, watched the waves roll against stone. His red hair flickered in the breeze, and in his hand was a small scroll bound in sealing cloth, Arashi's final message, never read by the world. He broke the seal. Inside, her words echoed softly. If this world ever falls back into darkness, if hatred returns, if the weak suffer again, don't look for a hero. Be one. He smiled, and as the stars glittered above, he vanished into the night, cloak billowing behind him, bearing the symbol of the leaf reborn in a spiral etched in flame. A new story was about to begin. Not of Naruto, not of Arashi, but of the next light, waiting to rise. The years that followed Arashi's sacrifice were marked by progress, but also by whispers of a looming change. The new generation of shinobi had been trained in the ideals she fought for, unity, peace, and understanding, but not everyone was content with the world as it was. In the shadows, remnants of the old world, those who longed for the power and control that once ruled, began to stir. They were the ones who had been left behind. The ones who had watched as the villages fell, and peace spread like a blanket across the world. They didn't want peace. They wanted power. The seeds of rebellion were small at first, disruptions at the edges of society, minor clashes between rogue groups, but it wasn't long before the storm began to take shape. From the ashes of old clans, a new movement emerged, the Black Flame. It was led by an enigmatic figure known only as Kuro. His face hidden by a mask, his motives unclear, he moved like a shadow through the cracks of the peace Arashi had fought for. He spoke of the ancient days, when the shinobi were true warriors, when strength ruled all, and those who were weak were cast aside. The Black Flame spread quickly, like fire in dry grass. They were not interested in overthrowing the current system, they wanted to bring back the real shinobi world, where power was everything and peace was a lie. Kuro's message was simple: only through struggle can we find true strength. Only through war can we build a future. Arashi's name was invoked often, twisted into a symbol of peace, an ideal that Kuro declared had failed. But there was more to his movement than just ideology. The Black Flame had gathered rogue shinobi, mercenaries, and dark chakra users who had long been lost to the world. They practiced forbidden jutsu, those once sealed away by the sages. Kuro himself wielded a power that was unfamiliar, chakra black as night, like the very essence of destruction. Arashi's name lived on in whispers among the rebels, but it was the new generation that would have to decide whether her dream could endure. Haven's greatest test, the peace Arashi had built, was suddenly under threat. As the Black Flame moved closer, Arashi's successors, the new leaders of Haven, began to prepare. Among them was Tetsuya, the son of one of Arashi's closest allies, and a prodigy in his own right. His chakra was strong, and his understanding of peace ran deep. He had been taught by the legends, not just in technique but in heart. Tetsuya wasn't the only one who felt the shifting tide. There were others who had felt the calling of the Black Flame, drawn to its darkness by the promise of true strength. They were shinobi who had been trained in the new way but felt their abilities were stifled by the ideals of peace. The divide was deep, and even those closest to Arashi's memory were torn. Peace isn't just the absence of conflict, Tetsuya argued, standing before the Council of Haven. It's the presence of purpose. We can't just sit idly by while the world falls into chaos again. But we can't fall back into the old ways, either, another elder countered. The cost of war is too great. We saw what it did to Naruto, to Arashi. The sacrifices they made. I'm not suggesting war for the sake of war, Tetsuya cut in, his voice steady. But we can't pretend the world isn't changing. If we don't act, the black flame will burn us all down. We need to understand their goals, their motives. I'll go to them." The council hesitated, but in the end, Tetsuya's resolve won them over. He was tasked with seeking out Kuro and understanding the true extent of the Black Flame's intentions. If there was any hope of saving the peace Arashi had fought for, he would need to be the one to face it. Into the abyss, Tetsuya ventured into the heart of the Black Flame's territory, a place where the light of hope barely touched the ground. The landscape was barren, the skies perpetually overcast, and the air thick with the scent of ash. It was here, in the ruins of the old world, that Kuro waited. The first meeting was silent. Kuro stood at the edge of a cliff, watching the dark horizon. "You seek peace," Kuro's voice broke the stillness. "But peace is an illusion. You're living in a world built on lies, a world where the weak thrive and the strong are silenced." Tetsuya took a step forward, his eyes burning with determination. "You've twisted the truth. Peace is the only path forward. The world has to learn to grow together, not tear itself apart." Kuro turned slowly, his mask gleaming in the low light. "Then you are a fool, like the others. You think Arashi's dream will last forever. That the people will listen to your ideals. You underestimate human nature." "I believe in Arashi's dream because she believed in people," Tetsuya replied, his voice unwavering. "And I will carry that belief forward, no matter what." The two stared at each other, the tension between them thickening. Kuro's eyes glinted beneath the mask, and for a moment, Tetsuya could almost feel the darkness within him, the coldness of a man who had given up on everything. "You are not ready," Kuro whispered, his voice dripping with disdain. Tetsuya raised his hand, his chakra flaring around him. "I'm ready, and I'll prove it." The battle between Tetsuya and Kuro was a clash of ideologies and power. Tetsuya's chakra flared with the light of hope, the strength of the ideals Arashi had fought for. Kuro's was a dark, oppressive force, destructive, consuming. But Tetsuya fought not just with power, but with the weight of everything Arashi had sacrificed. In the end, the fight was not won by strength alone. It was won by conviction. Kuro fell, his darkness dissipating into the air, leaving behind nothing but a whisper of defeat. But even in victory, Tetsuya knew this was only the beginning. The black flame might have been extinguished for now, but the seeds of discord were still there, lingering in the hearts of those who believed in power over peace. The world was at a crossroads, and Tetsuya stood at its center. Would the ideals Arashi had fought for truly endure? Would peace rise again from the ashes of the past? He looked up at the sky, knowing that, like his ancestors before him, he would have to fight for that answer. And as the sun began to set, casting the world in hues of gold, he swore one thing. Peace would never be a dream. It would be a legacy. The world held its breath in the aftermath of the Black Flame's defeat. Tetsuya returned to Haven, weary but resolute. The battle had been won, but he knew that peace, like everything of true worth, had to be constantly defended. The seeds of division were still scattered among the world's people, and while the Black Flame had been extinguished, there would always be another threat, another challenge that tested the ideals Arashi had left behind. Tetsuya didn't rest on his laurels. He spent months traveling across the lands, speaking to the people, hearing their fears and their desires. It was clear that not everyone shared the same vision of peace. Some feared that the world had become too complacent, too fragile, and that without the strength of the old ways, they were bound to crumble once more. And then there were those who still felt the allure of the Black Flame's philosophy. They had seen Kuro's power, felt its pull, and they weren't ready to let go of it. For them, the idea of a world without struggle, without dominance, was anathema to everything they had come to believe. One evening, after a particularly long day of diplomatic talks, Tetsuya stood on the balcony of Haven's tallest tower. The sunset painted the sky in deep oranges and purples, the gentle wind carrying with it the faint scent of distant rain. He was exhausted, but his mind raced, unable to quiet. He wasn't the only one watching the horizon. "Is it really over, do you think?" The voice came from behind him, calm and measured. Tetsuya turned to find a familiar figure standing in the doorway, the shadowy silhouette of Ayumi, a young woman who had once been an agent of the Black Flame but had joined the Crimson Guard after the battle. Her loyalty had never been in question, but she still had questions of her own. "I don't think anything is ever truly over," Tetsuya said, his voice distant. "We're always just one step away from the next challenge. But what matters is what we do with the time we have." Ayumi nodded, stepping out onto the balcony to stand beside him. She gazed at the horizon too, her expression unreadable. I remember when we fought together against Kuro. The world seemed so small then. But now, I don't know. It feels like we're on the edge of something even bigger. Tetsuya knew exactly what she meant. The Black Flame had been defeated, but it was more than just a shadowy organization. It was a symbol of the deeper unrest that still simmered beneath the surface of the world. Old ways, old grudges, and old ideologies had not been erased by one battle. The real challenge was in the hearts of the people, in their fears and their hopes, in their yearning for strength, security, and freedom. That's why I'm not stopping, he said, turning toward her. We've won the battle, but we haven't won the war. We've laid the foundation, but we need to keep building. And not just for Shinobi, but for everyone. We have to show them that peace isn't just a dream, it's a choice. A choice we have to make every day. Ayumi smiled softly, though there was a touch of sadness in her eyes. It's not going to be easy, is it? Tetsuya shook his head. No, it never is. But if we're going to honor the legacy of those who came before us, of Naruto, of Arashi, we have to be willing to fight for that peace, over and over, no matter what. A new dawn. Months passed, and slowly, the world began to change. There were no large-scale battles, no armies marching in the streets, but there was tension. There were conversations in every corner of the world, from the smallest villages to the largest cities. People were forced to confront the ideals of their past, to reconcile their longing for power with the peace that had been achieved. Some resisted, others embraced it, slowly but surely. Tetsuya continued his journey, not as a warrior, but as a symbol of the change that was needed. He met with clans that still clung to old ideologies, spoke to leaders who remembered the pain of the past and feared that peace would make them weak. He offered them a simple truth: strength doesn't come from domination, it comes from unity. In time, his message found fertile ground. People began to realize that peace didn't mean complacency. It meant understanding, growth, and the strength to protect each other. But even as Tetsuya worked to build this new future, shadows lingered. Deep in the bowels of the land, a new power began to rise, one not driven by the need for war, but by something far more dangerous: indifference. This was the quiet threat that Tetsuya feared the most, the idea that people could become so comfortable with peace that they would forget what it took to maintain it. One evening, Tetsuya received a visitor in his chambers. It was Ayumi, her face grim. "There's been a disturbance," she said, handing him a sealed scroll. "A group calling themselves the Forgotten has begun spreading a message." Tetsuya broke the seal and scanned the contents. It was a manifesto, claiming that the peace they had fought for was a lie. That the world was not ready for such fragile ideals. They preached that true power lay in freedom, the freedom to choose your own path, even if that path led to conflict. They rejected the idea of unity, seeing it as nothing more than a facade. "The Forgotten," Tetsuya murmured. "They believe in nothing." Ayumi nodded. "They think peace has shackled humanity. They want to tear down what we've built and let the world find its own way, no matter how brutal." Tetsuya stared at the scroll, his thoughts racing. He knew that this movement was different from the Black Flame. They weren't about power for power's sake. They were about rejecting the very idea of unity, of peace, of common purpose. They were a force that could fracture everything. "I can't let this happen," Tetsuya said firmly. "We have to stop them before they turn the world against itself." Ayumi placed a hand on his shoulder. "You're not alone, Tetsuya. We'll stand with you." And so, the battle for the future of peace began again. But this time, it wasn't just about fighting enemies, it was about fighting the very idea that peace was something fragile, something that could be broken. Tetsuya knew that the true enemy was not the Forgotten or any other group, it was the belief that people could never truly change. But he also knew one thing for sure. If Arashi's legacy had taught him anything, it was that peace was always worth fighting for. Even when the world seemed to fall back into chaos, even when the shadows of the past loomed large, there would always be those willing to rise and protect the light. And this time, the world would be ready. Tetsuya stood at the center of Haven's council chamber, the weight of his thoughts pressing down on him. The Forgotten had grown too quickly. Their message, seductive in its simplicity, had spread like wildfire, igniting sparks of unrest across the lands. Some cities were already seeing riots, arguments turning into battles in the streets. The very fabric of the peace Arashi and Naruto had fought for seemed to be unraveling, piece by piece. He'd seen it all before: the fear, the unrest, the desire for change that twisted into something darker. The Forgotten were not the same as the Black Flame. They didn't seek to conquer or dominate, they sought to dismantle everything, to tear down what had been built, leaving nothing but a wasteland of unchecked desires. Their message was a dangerous one: freedom through chaos. Tetsuya knew that if they succeeded, the world would plunge back into an age of constant war. People would forget what peace had cost. Worse still, they would forget what peace could bring. He turned his gaze to the council, his trusted allies who had fought alongside him, and Arashi, who had watched the world transform into something better. Their faces were grim, knowing what was at stake. "We've already lost too much to fall into despair," Tetsuya said, his voice carrying the weight of the truth. "If we let the Forgotten tear us apart, if we let them convince the people that peace is weak, we will undo everything. Arashi's dream will be nothing but a memory. Do you think you can stop them?" One of the elders asked. "They've already infiltrated villages and strongholds. Their influence is spreading faster than we anticipated." Tetsuya's eyes narrowed. "I don't think we can stop them by force alone. We need to show the people why peace matters, why it's worth fighting for. We have to remind them that freedom without responsibility is just anarchy. And we can't afford that." There was a moment of silence in the room before Ayumi stepped forward. Her presence had always been a quiet one, but now, she spoke with the fierce conviction she had gained after joining the Crimson Guard. "You're right, but we can't do it alone. We need the support of the people who still believe in what we fought for. And we need to reach the ones who have fallen to the Forgotten's rhetoric before they become too lost." Tetsuya nodded. "Then we'll make it our mission to show them the truth. We'll go to the villages, the people. We'll speak to them directly. We'll remind them of what we lost, and why we have to protect the future we've built." The journey was long, and the challenges were greater than Tetsuya had anticipated. As he traveled from village to village, town to town, he saw firsthand the fractures in the world that peace had left behind. Old hatreds, buried beneath the surface for so long, were now rising again. People were angry, not at the peace itself, but at the sacrifices they had been asked to make. They resented the way life had become too calm, too predictable. They longed for the freedom to act without consequence, to embrace the chaos that had once defined their lives. And the Forgotten were there, every step of the way, whispering into the ears of the disillusioned, offering them an escape from the peaceful order they had come to resent. It was during one of these journeys that Tetsuya came across a familiar face, a face he hadn't seen in years. "Yumi?" he asked, his voice quiet with disbelief. The woman standing before him was unmistakable. Yumi, one of Arashi's closest friends and a powerful shinobi in her own right, now stood with a group of Forgotten members, her once kind eyes shadowed with doubt. Her long, dark hair was now streaked with silver, and the vibrant energy she once had seemed dulled by the years of struggle. "Tetsuya," she said, her voice cold. "I didn't expect to see you here. But I'm glad you came. Maybe now you'll understand." "Understand what?" Tetsuya's heart sank. "Yumi, this isn't the way. The Forgotten are not offering freedom, they're offering destruction. Chaos doesn't build anything, it tears everything apart." Yumi shook her head. "You still don't get it, do you? The peace you're trying to protect is a lie. It's fragile. It doesn't hold. We've all seen the cracks. The world isn't as perfect as you think it is. People are suffering. They always will. The Forgotten, they understand that. They're offering something real, something that doesn't hide from the truth." Tetsuya's eyes softened with understanding. He'd known Yumi for years. She had always been driven by a deep sense of justice, but the world had changed her. The years of peace had left her feeling empty, disconnected from the very ideals she once fought for. And now, she stood on the other side, convinced that the world needed to return to its roots. "I understand that people are hurting," Tetsuya said gently, "but tearing everything down isn't the answer. We've been through the worst already. We've seen the destruction. We've seen the cost of war. You've seen it, too. The Forgotten aren't offering freedom, Yumi. They're offering an escape from responsibility. And that will only lead to more pain." Yumi's eyes flickered with uncertainty, but she didn't waver. "You don't know what it's like to feel like everything you've worked for is meaningless. To feel like you're just waiting for the world to break again." Tetsuya stepped forward, his voice low but resolute. "I know exactly what that feels like. I know what it's like to feel like everything is slipping away. But we have to stand firm. We have to be the ones who show the world that peace can be more than just an illusion. It's hard, it's frustrating, but it's worth it, and we can't let the past repeat itself." For a moment, Yumi was silent. The words hung between them, heavy with the weight of years lost. Finally, she spoke again, her voice quieter now. I don't know if I can go back to that world. But I know you, Tetsuya. And I know what you're fighting for. Her gaze softened. Maybe I can help you find another way. It wasn't much, but it was a start. And for the first time in years, Tetsuya felt the tiniest spark of hope flicker in the darkness. The conflict was far from over. The Forgotten continued to spread. Their message, their influence growing with each passing day. But Tetsuya was no longer alone in his fight. With Ayumi by his side, and now Yumi's reluctant support, they began to gather a new coalition of allies, shinobi who believed in the power of peace, but also in the need for strength to protect it. They faced many more challenges, and the road ahead was long and uncertain. But one thing had become clear to Tetsuya: the battle wasn't just for peace, it was for the very soul of the world. It was a fight to remind people of the value of unity, of compassion, of responsibility. The Forgotten might have spread their darkness, but the light was still there. And as long as Tetsuya had breath in his lungs, he would fight to protect it. The world had already seen what darkness could do. It was time to show them what light could build. The days turned into weeks, and the weight of the situation only grew heavier. Tetsuya's journey across the lands had now become more than just a personal mission, it was a movement. The Forgotten, though elusive and fragmented, had found fertile ground in the hearts of those disillusioned with the current peace. While they promised a world of freedom, they offered none of the responsibility that came with it. But Tetsuya refused to believe the world was lost. He continued to speak to people, villagers, merchants, warriors, and farmers, sharing his vision of a world where peace wasn't simply the absence of war, but an active force that required nurturing, care, and constant vigilance. Still, not all were ready to listen. In one village, Tetsuya and his group were met with a hostile crowd, chanting for the freedom that the Forgotten had promised. The villagers, once hopeful of the peace brought by Tetsuya and his comrades, had now lost faith. They saw the world's scars too clearly, too painfully. As Tetsuya stepped forward to address them, he could see the fury in their eyes, the anger and frustration that had been building for so long. He'd expected resistance, but he wasn't prepared for this level of animosity. The Forgotten's words had taken root in their hearts. "I know you're hurting," Tetsuya said, his voice firm but compassionate. "I know it feels like the peace we fought for isn't enough. That it hasn't given you the strength you need. But the answer isn't chaos. It's not tearing down what we've built. It's working together, in our pain, in our struggles, to make something stronger, something worth protecting." A voice rang out from the crowd, bitter and sharp. "You say peace, but we've seen nothing but weakness. The peace you've given us is fragile. And when it breaks, what are we left with?" The crowd murmured in agreement, their frustration turning into anger. Tetsuya clenched his fists, but he kept his resolve. He understood their feelings. He understood that, for some, the idea of peace without power felt like a trap. It was in those moments, in the silence between the shouts, that he saw the true challenge. It wasn't the Forgotten, not directly. It was the belief that peace had no value unless it came with dominance, with unshakable power. "Peace isn't weakness," Tetsuya replied, his eyes scanning the crowd, catching the gaze of those willing to listen. "Peace is what allows us to grow stronger, to protect those we love, to build a future for ourselves without fear of destruction. It's not about being powerless, it's about finding strength in unity. In trust." A young man, his face twisted in anger, stepped forward, his voice cutting through the air. "And if that trust is broken, what then? What happens when someone comes to shatter everything you've worked for?" Tetsuya's heart ached for the young man. He had lived through the wars, seen how fragile peace could be, and yet, he failed to see the power that came from protecting that peace. Tetsuya stepped closer, his voice softer this time. "If someone tries to shatter our peace, we defend it. Together. With everything we have. But we don't destroy what we've built because we fear it might break. We keep it strong, we keep it alive, and we make sure it stands. But we do it as a community." The crowd fell into a tense silence. The young man's anger simmered, but there was something else behind his eyes, doubt. He wasn't fully convinced, but the seed of uncertainty had been planted. As the days passed, Tetsuya continued his travels, and the resistance of the Forgotten grew. There were those who remained steadfast in their belief in the movement, and those who, after listening to Tetsuya, began to question their choices. Slowly, but surely, the tide began to turn. People started to see that peace wasn't a weakness, it was a strength. It was a bond that united them, not as individuals, but as a collective force. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. The Forgotten did not give up easily. They had a vast network of supporters, and their rhetoric continued to spread, particularly among those who still sought power through destruction. The world had not yet seen the full scope of their power, but Tetsuya could feel the darkness gathering on the horizon. In the dead of night, the Crimson Guard gathered for their next move. Tetsuya stood in front of them, his mind heavy with the weight of the decision ahead. He had been in the eye of the storm for so long that he could feel the shift in the air. The Forgotten weren't just a threat to the villages, to the peace they had fought for. They were now a threat to everything that had come to represent a future of hope. "We cannot allow this movement to fester any longer," Tetsuya said, his voice strong. "They will destroy everything we've worked for. We have to confront them directly. But not with violence. We have to show them that their path will only lead to more suffering. That their vision is a lie." Ayumi, ever the strategist, stepped forward. "We can't just convince them with words. We need to dismantle their core, take away their reason for existing. If we can sever their leadership, perhaps their influence will falter." Tetsuya nodded. "I agree. We need to find where their true power lies. If we can neutralize that, we'll have a fighting chance." The plan was simple but dangerous. Infiltrate the core of the Forgotten, gather intelligence, and strike before they could organize their next large-scale attack. It was a risky move, but it was their best shot at ending this before it escalated into full-scale war. The mission took them deep into enemy territory, into the heart of the Forgotten's base, a place that felt cold, almost lifeless. The once vibrant world they had known now seemed distant, replaced by a harsh, unforgiving landscape. Every step they took felt like a betrayal of everything they had fought for, but Tetsuya remained resolute. He couldn't afford to let doubt cloud his judgment. They infiltrated the base with precision, each member of the Crimson Guard performing their role perfectly. Tetsuya and Ayumi led the way, quietly neutralizing any opposition they encountered. The tension was palpable. Every sound, every footstep echoed through the corridors, a reminder that one mistake could cost them everything. Finally, they reached the inner sanctum, where the leaders of the Forgotten held court. The confrontation was inevitable. Tetsuya stepped forward, his voice steady but fierce. "The Forgotten's time is over," he declared. "You can no longer convince the world that destruction is the path to freedom. Your message is nothing more than a lie." From the shadows emerged their leader, a tall, imposing figure draped in black robes, his face hidden beneath a mask. "You think you can stop us, Tetsuya?" the figure said, his voice like ice. "We are not the ones who are lost. It is you and your peace that are doomed. The world cannot survive under the weight of false hope." Tetsuya met the masked man's gaze. "It's not false hope," he said quietly. "It's the only hope we have left." With that, the battle began, not just of strength, but of ideals. Each strike was a battle for the future of the world. Tetsuya fought not for dominance, but for the chance to preserve the peace Arashi had worked so hard to establish. As the dust settled and the final confrontation ended, the leader of the Forgotten lay defeated. Tetsuya stood, panting, his heart still racing from the battle, but the weight of his task was far from over. The movement was not truly defeated. There would be others who rose to take its place. But for now, a victory had been won. "Tetsuya," Ayumi said, her voice soft. "You did it. You showed them what peace really means." Tetsuya didn't respond immediately. His eyes scanned the horizon, a place where the battle was never truly over. But he was no longer alone in this fight. As long as people believed in peace, as long as they were willing to stand together, there would always be hope. And with hope, there was always a chance to rebuild, to move forward. The fight was far from over, but Tetsuya knew one thing. He would keep going, because the future they had worked for, the future they had fought for, was worth every sacrifice. And he would protect it, forever. The next few days passed in a haze of exhaustion. Tetsuya could feel the weight of their victory settling on his shoulders, but there was no time to rest. The battle with the Forgotten had ended for now, but their ideals still lingered in the hearts of those who had been swayed. The world was not suddenly at peace, and Tetsuya knew that peace could never be taken for granted. It had to be protected, nurtured, and defended. He couldn't let himself forget that, not for a second. He continued his journey, moving from one village to the next, speaking to those who were still on the fence about the Forgotten message. Each conversation was a struggle, but Tetsuya remained firm, never wavering in his belief that peace, though fragile, was worth fighting for. It wasn't easy. There were moments when the despair in people's eyes made him question whether he was fooling himself, whether the world would ever truly be free of the shadows of war. But then there were moments like the one in a small village at the edge of the land, where he saw the spark of hope in a child's eyes. That child had never known a world without war, without conflict. But when Tetsuya spoke, when he shared the story of what Arashi and his comrades had fought for, the child's eyes lit up with something Tetsuya hadn't seen in a long time: belief. It was a reminder that, even in the darkest moments, there was always a chance to turn things around. The Forgotten hadn't won, they had only planted seeds of doubt, and those seeds could be uprooted with the right message. As Tetsuya continued his travels, he found allies in the most unexpected places. Some came from the very villages that had once been swept up in the Forgotten's rhetoric, others were people who had been quietly working to preserve the peace, refusing to let the world slide back into chaos. Together, they formed a new coalition, one that would stand firm against the forces that sought to destroy the fragile peace they had built. But even with their growing numbers, there were still those who believed in the message of the Forgotten, those who refused to see the value of what Tetsuya and his allies were trying to protect. There were whispers of another movement brewing, something even darker and more dangerous than before. Tetsuya couldn't help but feel the weight of it. Was this an endless cycle? Would they always be fighting to protect something so fragile, so easily torn apart? But as he sat with Ayumi, Yumi, and the others, discussing their next steps, he found strength in their unity. No matter how many times they were knocked down, they always got back up. They would keep fighting, and if they ever lost, they would lose together, not alone. That was the power of peace, the power of unity. And no matter how hard the road ahead might be, they would continue walking it together. They had no other choice. The world would never be perfect. But it could be better. It could be a place where people lived, not in fear, but in hope. And as long as there was even a glimmer of that hope, Tetsuya would keep fighting. He owed it to the people who had believed in him, in them, and to the future they still hoped for. He wasn't ready to give up, not yet, not ever. The journey was far from over, but Tetsuya had grown accustomed to the weight on his shoulders. Each step he took felt like a battle, a fight against the overwhelming tide of doubt and despair that threatened to engulf the world. But the road was not entirely bleak. There were victories, small moments that reminded him why he had started this journey in the first place. In one village, he met an old man who had once been a soldier in the wars before the peace. His hands trembled as he handed Tetsuya a small wooden box, the wood worn smooth with age. "Take this," the man said, his voice a whisper. "It belonged to my son. He died fighting for peace. I don't know if you'll succeed, but I hope you do. If you don't, then there will be no future left worth living for." Tetsuya held the box in his hands, a symbol of the countless lives lost in the name of peace. He could feel the weight of it, the memories, the sacrifices, and it reminded him once again of the responsibility that lay before him. He didn't just fight for the present, he fought for the future, for those who couldn't fight anymore. And he would honor their memories by ensuring their sacrifices weren't in vain. The days turned into weeks, and soon the battles grew more intense. The Forgotten had become more organized, their movements more strategic. They were no longer just a group of rebels scattered across the land, they were a force to be reckoned with, a rising tide that sought to tear down everything Tetsuya and his allies had worked to build. It was clear now that the war wouldn't be won by speeches or ideals. It would be won with action, with blood and sacrifice. In one such battle, Tetsuya led his allies into the heart of an enemy stronghold. The air was thick with tension as they moved through the darkened halls, the silence broken only by the sound of their footsteps. There were no words of encouragement this time, no speeches about hope or peace. Just the grim reality of war. As they infiltrated deeper into the stronghold, Tetsuya could feel the presence of the Forgotten's leaders drawing closer. They knew they had to end this here, or risk losing everything. The confrontation was inevitable. The leader of the Forgotten, the figure in black robes, stood before them. His mask was gone now, revealing a face twisted in hatred, a face that had been scarred by the pain of a lifetime of war. His eyes, however, were empty. There was no warmth in them, no sign of the humanity that once might have existed. "I knew it would come to this," the leader said, his voice cold. "You've taken everything from me, my beliefs, my vision. I won't let you destroy what I've built. The world isn't meant for peace, Tetsuya. It's meant for power, and if you refuse to see that, then you're just as much of a fool as those who followed you." Tetsuya's heart tightened. He saw the pain in the leader's eyes, but it was clouded by a thirst for vengeance, for a twisted kind of justice that could never bring the peace he desired. You don't have to do this, Tetsuya said, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment. There's another way, we can still make this world better. It's not too late. The leader laughed, a bitter sound that echoed in the silent hall. You think I don't know that? I tried to build a world where we wouldn't have to fight, where the strong could protect the weak. But that world doesn't exist. There's only the struggle for power. And I will have it, no matter what it costs. The tension snapped like a taut wire. The battle erupted in an instant, chaos enveloping them as both sides clashed with fierce determination. Tetsuya fought with all his might, his resolve unwavering. His comrades stood with him, side by side, each of them fighting for the same cause. But despite their unity, the battle seemed endless. The leader's forces were vast, and the tide of battle seemed to shift with every passing moment. In the midst of the chaos, Tetsuya found himself face to face with the leader once more. They fought fiercely, each strike carrying the weight of their beliefs, their desires. But in the end, it was Tetsuya who emerged victorious. With a swift move, he disarmed the leader, his blade pressing against the man's throat. You've lost, Tetsuya said, his voice filled with quiet sorrow. This path only leads to destruction. Don't you see that? We can still save what's left. The leader's eyes darkened, his body trembling with rage. You don't understand. You never will. Power is all that matters. And you're weak for believing otherwise. Tetsuya's heart ached as he looked down at the leader. He saw not just an enemy, but a man broken by his own experiences, a man who had once believed in something, only to lose himself in the pursuit of an ideal. I understand more than you think, Tetsuya said softly. I've seen the cost of war. The people who suffer. The lives that are destroyed. And I won't let that happen again. Not if I can help it. With a final, sorrowful glance, Tetsuya stepped back, signaling for his comrades to retreat. The leader lay there, defeated, but the battle was far from over. The peace they had fought so hard to protect was still fragile, still in danger. But Tetsuya knew one thing for sure, he wasn't going to stop. No matter how many times he had to fight, no matter how many sacrifices had to be made, he would keep going. Because the world was worth saving. And as long as there was breath in his lungs, he would fight for the future, for peace, for hope. The war was not over. But with every battle they fought, with every life they saved, they were one step closer to the world they had dreamed of. A world where power wasn't defined by destruction, but by the strength to protect and build. A world where peace wasn't a fleeting moment, but a lasting foundation for all to stand on. And Tetsuya would stand guard over it, no matter the cost. The months passed, and despite the constant battles, the flickers of hope Tetsuya and his allies had worked so hard to kindle began to grow. Small villages flourished, healing from the scars left by war. People who had once been wary of peace were beginning to believe in it again, seeing that a world without endless conflict was possible. But even as the world began to shift, Tetsuya could feel the looming shadow of the forgotten and their fragmented remnants, still lurking in the corners of the world, waiting for a chance to strike. The coalition they had built was stronger than ever, but the lingering uncertainty was ever present. Could the peace they were fighting for truly endure? Would the scars of the past ever fade completely? Tetsuya often found himself gazing at the horizon, contemplating the path ahead, wondering if he could ever fully escape the ghosts of his past. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm golden light over the land, Tetsuya sat by the campfire with Ayumi and the others. The crackling of the flames was a comforting sound, and for a moment, it felt like they were simply a group of friends, sharing a quiet moment. But even in those rare moments of calm, Tetsuya couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. Ayumi, ever perceptive, noticed his distant expression. "What's on your mind?" she asked, her voice gentle but knowing. Tetsuya sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know, Ayumi. It feels like every time we take one step forward, something always seems to pull us back. The forgotten might be defeated, but I can't help but feel like the fight isn't over. There's always another threat, another shadow lurking in the background." Ayumi studied him for a moment before speaking, her tone firm. "I know what you mean. But we can't keep looking over our shoulders, Tetsuya. We can't live in fear of what might come. We've already fought to get this far. We've already given everything we could. It's okay to rest now. It's okay to have hope." Her words hung in the air, a reminder that the journey they had embarked on together was not just about fighting. There had to be moments of peace, moments of reflection. But Tetsuya wasn't sure if he could ever fully embrace that. The scars of the past were too deep, the weight of their battles too heavy. Peace was something he longed for, but he also feared it. What if peace meant vulnerability? What if, in their pursuit of a better world, they had made themselves targets for something even darker? The wind rustled the leaves around them, carrying with it the scent of the earth, fresh after the rain. It was a quiet reminder that life, like the world, was always in flux. Nothing remained static, not even peace. But perhaps that was the beauty of it all. Peace was never something that could be taken for granted. It had to be fought for, protected, and cherished. Just as Tetsuya was about to voice his concerns, a messenger arrived from a neighboring village. His face was pale, his eyes wide with fear. "Tetsuya, there's been an attack. A group of mysterious figures, unlike anything we've seen before. They've taken over the capital." The words hit Tetsuya like a physical blow. His heart sank. They had known peace would always be fragile, but it was something else entirely. "We need to go," Tetsuya said immediately, his voice cold with determination. He turned to Ayumi, who gave him a brief, understanding nod. "Let's move quickly," she said, rising from her seat. "We'll help you fight. This time, we'll end it for good." The group didn't need any more words. They gathered their things, preparing for the journey ahead. Tetsuya felt the familiar rush of adrenaline as they set out, the weight of their mission settling back onto his shoulders. There was no time for doubt, no time for hesitation. The world was still at war, and the battle for peace was far from over. As they approached the capital, the air grew tense. There were no signs of life, no sounds of the bustling city that they had known. The gates were open, but the streets were eerily silent. Something was wrong. Tetsuya's instinct screamed at him, warning him that this was not just another skirmish, it was something much more dangerous. The closer they got, the more they saw. Buildings were destroyed, and a strange, ominous energy filled the air. A dark force had taken hold of the city, and it wasn't just the remnants of the forgotten. These figures were different, more powerful, more organized. Whoever they were, they had an agenda, and it was far darker than anything Tetsuya had encountered before. As they moved through the ruined streets, they finally found a group of these mysterious figures. Their cloaks were black, with symbols etched in crimson red, symbols that seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy. They stood in a circle, chanting something in a language Tetsuya didn't recognize. The air around them crackled with dark chakra, and the temperature dropped sharply. Tetsuya stepped forward, his voice steady but filled with the weight of the moment. "Who are you? What do you want with the capital?" The leader of the group turned, his face hidden beneath a mask, his eyes glowing with an unnatural light. "We are the keepers of the void," he said, his voice low and resonant. "The world you've worked so hard to build is nothing but an illusion. Peace, it's a fragile, fleeting thing. And we are here to show you that true power lies in embracing the chaos of the void." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Tetsuya felt his heart beat faster, a cold realization creeping over him. This was no ordinary enemy. These were not just another group of rebels or power-hungry warlords. The keepers of the void were something else entirely, an ancient force that sought to dismantle everything they had fought for. "Then we'll stop you," Tetsuya said firmly, drawing his blade. "No matter what it takes." The battle that followed was unlike any Tetsuya had ever fought. The keepers of the void were powerful, their chakra overwhelming, their attacks swift and unpredictable. But Tetsuya and his comrades fought with everything they had, the spirit of their cause burning bright even in the face of this new threat. The fight was long, and as the day turned to night, Tetsuya could feel the toll it was taking on them all. But he couldn't give up. Not now, not when they were so close to the end. And so, with every strike, with every drop of sweat and blood, they fought to protect the future they had worked so hard to build. Because as long as they had breath in their lungs, as long as they had the strength to stand, they would never stop fighting for peace. The battle raged on through the night, the sounds of clashing steel and crackling chakra filling the air. Tetsuya moved with relentless precision, his blade cutting through the chaos around him, every strike fueled by the memories of those who had fallen. His comrades, Ayumi and the others, fought beside him with equal determination, each of them playing their part in this desperate struggle. The keepers of the void were unlike any enemy they had faced before. Their power was not just in their skill, but in the sheer malice that radiated from them, a force that seemed to warp the very air around them. Every time they struck, the ground trembled as if the world itself was being torn apart. Tetsuya knew they couldn't keep this up forever. The keepers were too strong, their numbers too great. He could see it in his allies' eyes, fatigue was starting to take its toll. Even Ayumi, who had always been a rock, was showing signs of wear. Stay focused, Tetsuya shouted over the noise, his voice a beacon through the chaos. We can't let them break through. But even as the words left his mouth, he could feel the tide shifting. One by one, his comrades were being pushed back. A blast of dark energy sent Yumi flying into a nearby building, and she didn't get up. Tetsuya's heart sank. Yumi. He tried to move toward her, but a powerful gust of wind, infused with dark chakra, slammed him back, knocking the breath out of him. The leader of the keepers, the one who had spoken earlier, stepped forward, his mask now removed to reveal a face twisted with madness. His eyes glowed like burning embers, and his presence seemed to drain the light from the world. You think you can save this world, Tetsuya? The leader sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. You are nothing but a fleeting dream. The void is inevitable, everything you've worked for is already crumbling, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. Tetsuya gritted his teeth, his hands tightening around his blade. I won't let you destroy everything we've built. Peace isn't a dream, it's a reality we can make, no matter how hard the fight. The leader laughed, a dark, hollow sound. You still don't understand, do you? Peace is the greatest illusion of all. It is weak, fragile, and doomed to fail. Chaos, on the other hand, is eternal. It is the truth of this world. And I will show you the power of the void. With a snap of his fingers, the keepers of the void surged forward, their attacks growing fiercer, more chaotic. Tetsuya's breath hitched as he saw the opening. The leader was about to strike with a massive burst of energy that could destroy everything in its path. Without thinking, he threw himself into the path of the attack, summoning every ounce of his chakra to create a barrier. The impact knocked him to the ground, his body aching with the force of the blast. Blood dripped from his wounds, but he didn't care. He had to keep fighting. He couldn't give up now, not when they were so close to victory. Ayumi appeared beside him, her expression filled with worry. Tetsuya, you can't keep doing this. You're pushing yourself too hard. I have to, he rasped, forcing himself to stand. I can't let them win. We've fought too long for this. But Ayumi's eyes were filled with pain as she looked at him. Tetsuya, there's no more time. If we don't end this now, it will all be for nothing. The leader of the keepers moved forward, his smile twisted with satisfaction. It's over, Tetsuya. The void will consume everything. Tetsuya felt the weight of those words. Was this it? Was this the end? Had all their struggles, all their sacrifices, been in vain? But then something deep inside him stirred, a familiar warmth, a force greater than any chakra or weapon. It was the hope they had fought for, the dream of a world without endless war. And it burned brighter than anything the keepers of the void could throw at him. Tetsuya stood tall, his eyes hardening with resolve. I won't let you take it. I won't let you destroy the future. His voice echoed through the battlefield, carrying with it a power that was not his own, but the collective will of everyone who had fought for peace. With a surge of energy, his chakra exploded outward, a brilliant light that pushed back the darkness. The keepers of the void staggered, momentarily blinded by the light. Tetsuya's blade glowed with the same radiant energy, a symbol of the hope he would never let die. With one final, decisive strike, he cut through the leader's defenses, his blade sinking deep into the heart of the dark force that threatened to tear the world apart. The leader's eyes widened in shock, his voice a ragged whisper. You cannot. But Tetsuya didn't listen. He didn't need to. With the force of everything he had fought for, he cleaved through the void's hold, shattering the leader's power and breaking the curse that had bound the world in darkness. The battlefield fell silent. The oppressive weight of the void seemed to lift, and for the first time in what felt like forever, the world seemed to breathe again. Tetsuya's body was battered, his strength nearly gone, but he stood firm. He had done it. They had done it. Ayumi and the others rushed to his side, their faces filled with relief and exhaustion. But there was no time for celebration, not yet. They had won, yes, but the world was still fragile, still healing. The scars of the past would take time to fade, and the path to peace would be long. But as they stood there, amidst the ruins of the capital, Tetsuya realized something. Peace wasn't something that could be forced, nor was it a state that could be easily maintained. It was a constant fight, a fight for every person, every village, every life. But it was worth it. And as long as he had the strength, he would keep fighting. Because peace, real peace, wasn't a dream. It was something that had to be earned, something that had to be protected. And Tetsuya would protect it, with every fiber of his being, for as long as he could. He turned to his friends, his allies, and nodded. Let's rebuild, together. And so, the journey continued. The battle for peace had been won, but the work was far from over. But for the first time in a long while, Tetsuya believed that a brighter future was possible. And no matter what came next, he would face it head-on, with the strength of those who had fought beside him, and the hope of a world that had yet to be fully realized. The rebuilding began slowly at first. The capital, once a place of thriving life, was now a wasteland. But as the days passed, the people began to emerge from hiding, drawn by the promise of a new beginning. Tetsuya and his comrades worked tirelessly alongside the survivors, helping to clear the debris, repair buildings, and rebuild lives. Every brick laid, every home restored, was a small victory, a testament to their resilience and determination. The keepers of the void had been vanquished, but their legacy lingered. The world had seen what true darkness looked like, and many still feared that it could return. There were whispers of other remnants of the void, groups that had escaped the battle, waiting for the right moment to strike again. But for now, the immediate threat had been neutralized. Peace, though fragile, was within reach. Tetsuya found himself spending long hours on the battlefield, overseeing the repairs and ensuring that the surrounding villages were safe. The work was exhausting, but it gave him a sense of purpose, a reminder that the world was still worth fighting for. He had seen too much destruction, too much suffering, to let it all slip away now. Ayumi was his constant companion, though, as the seasons passed, the world began to heal. The scars left by the keepers of the void remained, but they were no longer as daunting. People had begun to rebuild not just their homes, but their lives. The threat of the void had been vanquished, but new challenges lay ahead, and Tetsuya and his friends knew that peace, though hard-won, was always fragile. Tetsuya stood atop the rebuilt wall of the capital, gazing out at the horizon. Ayumi stood beside him, her presence comforting, but there was something different in the air. It wasn't the oppressive weight of war anymore, but the quiet promise of something new, something hopeful. I think we've done it, Ayumi said, her voice soft but resolute. Tetsuya nodded, though a part of him knew their work wasn't done. They'd fought against the void, but there were still remnants scattered across the land, dark forces who would try to reclaim what they had lost. But for now, they had made a stand. They had proven that hope could survive in a world that often felt like it was on the brink of collapse. And that was enough. We'll keep fighting, Tetsuya said, more to himself than to anyone else. As long as we have each other, we'll keep fighting. The city below was alive with activity, a sign of the new era they were all building. The streets once empty were now filled with people laughing, working, and dreaming. It felt like they had finally laid the foundation for the future they had all envisioned, a future where peace wasn't just a dream, but a reality. Ayumi turned to him, a small smile on her lips. We'll keep fighting, but maybe for a little while, we can rest, too. Tetsuya chuckled softly, the weariness of battle still present in his bones, but a deep satisfaction settling in his heart. Maybe, but for now, let's enjoy the peace we've earned. The sky began to darken, the first stars appearing above them as the day faded away. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, Tetsuya felt that whatever came next, they would be ready. And so, as the sun set and the city of the future came to life around them, Tetsuya and Ayumi stood together, ready for whatever the next chapter of their journey would bring. And with that, this is where part 1 ends. Hope you liked the story so far. There's still so much more to come, so stay tuned for the next chapter. Let's aim for 40 likes to see what happens next. Thanks for watching.